Welcome back, 7 Days to Die modding fans. This is Zith, and I've been getting some questions lately about mecanim animation. That's the new animation system in Unity. It replaces the legacy animation system that most folks have been using to date to modify 7 Days to Die. The issue is we're having problems, or Sperry specifically is having problems updating the legacy animation controller due to the extensive changes to the animation system that was done in the game in A17. So we may have to depreciate that legacy controller and not use it and move folks to mecanim. So that means a few videos to help people get started. What I'm going to focus on today is not how to all the basics of mecanim. There's plenty of videos out there for you to watch. I'll hit on a couple of things, but basically this video is about converting from the legacy animation system for the people that made entities in legacy, converting them straightforwardly over to the mechanim system. So let's go ahead and start it. For an example, I used this character called Maw. He was a forest boss that we used as a spawner in the winter mod. And he is a real mess, so it's going to take a bit to clean him up. I'm not going to go through all the cleanup on this. I'm going to get straight to the mechanim. But first, to get this silly looking mesh collider out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and let's just delete that and remove that. I will have to replace that with the colliders on the arms and the legs and so on. And I did a video on how to use the ragdoll wizard to do that really quickly. So we'll skip that for now, and let's get on to the controller. So in Legacy, on an entity, you had this animation component in which you listed the default starting animation, the number of animations you had, and then you listed here, in this case, is 8 animations: walk, attack, and so on. And you listed them all here, and you had to set each of these animations as a legacy type animation. So where is Maw? Here's his animation. So for example, on idle, looked a little bit like this, that you had that looping and remember we went and converted those. So to be able to convert this idle animation to be able to be used in Remech, we got to put it back to a generic animation. So again, you click up here, go into debug, and then uncheck the legacy box, and then go ahead and put it back into normal. Now you've got it looks a little bit different here. And that is now a generic animation. There's also humanoid, but for this point right now, I don't see a big advantage of using humanoid, even on biped characters, until we get things like rag dolls and stuff working. It does work, but we're going to go generic for this because it'll also work on animals. So going back to attack, I need to go ahead and change all of these really quick. And you can fast forward to this part because it's very repetitious, but I have to do it. And almost done. This is just tedious, but fortunately you don't have to watch it. Okay, and I did idle, so that leaves jump, run, and walk. Jump, run. And it shouldn't change the looping. I think that pretty much stays the same when you it doesn't get retoggled. We'll have to check that though. Been a while since I did one of these. And assume I put them all back into normal. It should be okay. So walk isn't looping, run doesn't loop, jump doesn't loop, idle should loop. Okay. Hit should not loop, die should not loop, attacks should not loop. So right, walk should loop, run should loop, and idle should loop. Those three. And the rest should not. Okay. So that's done. I don't think I missed any animations. Let's go back to where we were. Now, we no longer need this controller here. In fact, it's going to get in the way. We have to make that go away. So we're going to replace it with a different controller. So we're going to remove this. Well, for now, I'm going to leave it in there just to show you because we'll take it out at the end. So let me go add a component. And it's under miscellaneous for some bizarre reason. And it is called the animator. All right, so we have this other component. Again, we're going to go ahead and take the animation one out at the end, but it's nice to have it there because it gives you some references. So here we do in the animation and the animator, you need to have a controller that is a essentially kind of like a Visio thing. I'll show you in a second how that works. And I have provided a couple of controllers. One that is a basic mecanim template controller here. And I also have one for range, which is almost identical, but adds one extra path. And I'll focus on this one for now, but I'll show you the difference in a bit. So all you have to do is we drag this controller. Now a copy of that's up on my GitHub repo. Basically, it's called mecanim template. And what I like to do is always make copies of that template, rename them with the character name, because I don't want changes made in one to affect changes made on another. So if you keep using the same template and you start screwing with it, you're going to find that it's going to affect some of your other characters as well. So always have a unique name for your controllers. So all I have to do is drag this sucker over and put it in that box there. And as you see now, it's changed a bunch of things in here. We'll have to clear that up because now the animation names don't necessarily match the controller. But we can click on this animator tab. If you don't have that, you need to go ahead and add that window in there and dock it. But I already have it here. So here is basically the controller. So if we click on idle, we see right here that idle, and the naming convention, hope you can see this. I've had to change the resolution screen down to something that everybody can see. This controller, I've standardized it to use zeros and ones to differentiate between the different states. So this here is a mecanim state. And inside of this state, there are properties, one specifically a motion, which has your animation name. So under MAW here, if I go and I drag idle here, then I can look down here, and now you notice it's not all yellow and warnings. It's now correct. So you go through each of these here and drag in the appropriate animation. So for walk 0, we need to find walk and drag that into the motion. For run 0, we drag in run. Oh, you don't want to do that. For run 0, you drag in run. Okay. Now walk 1, and these are your alternative walks. We're not using them at this point. You can go ahead and, if you want, just drag the additional, the same walk in there. It really don't have to, because the pathing is not going to allow it ever to get there when we're done with it. But just for laughs, I'm going to go ahead and drag that in there. So now those are all right. We need to do the hit, and it used to be hit front on whatever character this controller came from, but we're going to fix that and put it to hit. The jump is jump, and attack 0 is attack, and attack 1 is attack 2. I like to make these things all match name-wise. It's kind of a cleanup thing that I do, but it's not important. It'll work fine. And then we got die, which is die. And have I missed any? I don't think so. Okay. So now we've dragged all the converted animations into the controller. Now how the controller works here is there's an entry point, and when the character is spawned into the game, it immediately defaults. This is the orange, this is the default path, defaults into the idle state. And he's going to stand there and just breathe and wait for some trigger to happen in the game to make him do something. He could walk. There's a path to walk 1, or he could walk 0, walk 1, and so forth. Now, the any state is when a trigger in the game happens. When the game basically says, hey, zombie, jump, it fires a trigger and goes to the jump. And when the jump completes its animation, it goes back to the idle. So you have this any state that fires off your attacks, fires off the death, fires off when the zombie's hurt, and when it jumps. Okay, and then things revert back to the idle state. Very simple controller, amazingly simpler than what the fun pimps are doing. That's really kind of an interesting, exciting, complex thing. We don't need that for getting a basic zombie in the game and having them walk around and attack and do zombie things. So yeah, that's basically the controller. Let's talk about the transitions now. You see a bunch of parameters over here. I pre-populated the controller with the ones that you'll run into. There's many more, but we won't mess with them right now. The circle here indicates that it is a trigger, and a square indicates that it's a Boolean, which is a true false. And then these here are values that you could put in for testing purposes in there. And the ones specifically I want to point out are the indexes, because we'll talk a little bit about that. How does the zombie game know whether to send it to walk 0 or walk 1? Well, I'm going to click on this little arrowhead here and bring that up. So now you have a transition from idle to walk, and you can adjust how much of a transition here you want, how much overlap that you want to smooth out that. Depending on the two animations, how closely they are in position to each other. In other words, are the guy standing almost in a boxing pose, say, and then you want him to start walking. The beginning of the walk animation isn't similar to the idle pose. It's going to look jerky if you don't have a kind of an overlap there with a transition. You don't want it too much. This is something that you play with once you get your character in the game to smooth it out. But what we're talking about specifically are these conditions. What is the conditions from moving from idle to walk? Well, we have created these conditions called movement state and walk index. So in the case that the movement state is greater than 0, which means he's not totally standing still, is a condition that has to be satisfied to be able to start the character moving towards this state. Also here's the switch. Walk index equals, if it's 0, it's going to go this way. If I click on this one, if it equals 1, it's going to go this way. Same thing with runs. If he happens to be in the walk state here, and to decide whether he's going to run, then if the movement state is greater than 1, then he will move into the run state. And specifically, he'll move into this run state if it's 0, and he'll go this way to run state 1 if it is equal to 1. Let's say he goes here and he went coming back. You have to have the conditions met for him to leave the running state. If the movement state now is less than 2 and the walk index is 1, he's going to go this way. If the index is, index is 0, he's going to move this way. If the index is 1, he's going to move this way. So that's this little kind of complex little grid here. Just simply gives him, shows how to move him between different index states. All the other ones work essentially like that. The attacks, don't worry about the overlaps. You're not going to really see, but I like it nice and clean. If there's a trigger called attack, like that, then he will attack, and then the index is looked at. If there's multiple attacks, it will decide which way. So 0 attack goes this way, and the attack 1 index sends it this way. So let's go ahead and hit play and see what's happening on this guy here. So right now he should just go into a looping idle pose, which is a fast breathing here. If we look at the animator, you see that it's gone from entry into this idle state, and it's looping because we set it to loop, right? So now let's go ahead and make it give an attack. The attack index, right, is set to 0, so it should go to this one when I click on the attack trigger. Boom, and it goes back and it loops it idle. If I went and changed the idle index here to 1 and then hit the attack trigger, it still goes to 1. What did I do wrong here? Attack index 1. Attack. All right, I'll just be an idiot. Okay, so it always helps to change the right field to do what you want. Okay, attack index 1 now, and check it again. And attack index 0, and attack goes that way. Same type of thing, jump. It goes up to the jump index, and is dead. Boom, he's down, and it's just going to stay there at that point. There's no need to put it to an exit. It doesn't seem to work, at least as far as the game's concerned, not with this controller. So that works. And if you get rid of dead, you have to basically just do something to get them back in the game. So that's the controller. That's the properties. I think I've covered most of them. Attack, jump, pain is when the hit animation happens. Um, you set the idle index, the walk index, pain index. If you want to have multiple idles, multiple hit type of reactions when he gets hit, you can add as many of these as you want. Just add a new state, put the animation in, and create a path to it, basically. Um, I actually can show you how to do that real quick here on the die one. Let's shut this off. On this, let me try is dead. Here you have the condition is dead is true, and the death index, which is equal 0 because there's only one of them. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. I'm going to delete this and click on any state, right click, make transition, drag it to there, and then left click, and it pops it up there. And I click on this, you see all the conditions are empty here. And I'm going to go ahead and add a couple conditions. Is dead true? And then here, basically a death index equal to 0. And now it'll send it on that path. And we can test it. Back into the scene, play. He's idling, and we go ahead and click is dead. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? We didn't put an animation in there, I think. All right, good. So let's go and click on this again. And let's look. The motion here. Die. And go back to play. Let's see if that's right. So I know I probably missed one other thing. But hey, this is how I learned. So the death index is 0, and I check on death index is 0, is dead. He's not going to die. So, oh, there it is. Okay. So what has happened on that one? Again, when you use the controller, this is already worked out for you. But let's go ahead and click on that and go to settings. And then we go ahead and uncheck this. I can't really, well, maybe I can if I drag this. Can transition to self. You need to turn that off on death animations. All right. So let's go ahead and try it again. And now he's idling away and click it. Oh, and he's dead. Again, apologize for crappy video, but it's been a long time since I did this, but there's always these little things in there. Death is pretty much the only one that you need to make sure it doesn't transition back to himself because it needs to go one way and complete its process. All right, so that's done, and pretty much the character is now converted to mecanim. One thing that you might also want to do is on your legacy models, put a muzzle object, an empty child object called muzzle with a capital M on the hand or right hand. Let me go ahead and do that real quick for you. If you want the character to be able to do ranged attacks using the scripts that Sphere is writing, basically on this right hand, you need to right click, and we'll create an empty object here, and we'll call it muzzle. And if you do that, then this character will have the ability to do ranged attacks if you decide that you want that. Doesn't hurt to have it there, but that reference point needs to be on the right hand as an empty child object on the right hand, spelled exactly that way, for you to be able to add a special attack and then have that special attack trigger a ranged attack, be it a bow or a gun or whatever like that. So that's pretty much it. You go ahead and drag this and export it in the same way. And let me show you the XML then. But before we do that, I remembered a couple of things that we need to do before we can save this character out. And the first one is we need to remove this animation controller here. We don't need it. That's part of the legacy system. To do that, you click on the gear and remove the component. and it should look like that when you're done. The second thing we need to do is add an avatar in here. Mecanim requires an avatar, where Legacy did not. To be able to get an avatar, there should be one in each of your animations. So we'll go real quick. I'll pick the idle animation here, and you'll see this right here is it inside the package. If you hit Control D, D for as in dog, it will go ahead and duplicate it. And again, you have one to put it outside of the package here. And we can then go ahead and go back and drag this into there. And now we have an avatar associated with it. So now when we save it out, the character will walk normally in the game. So here we are with the XML. Here is the old legacy system. You notice a couple of differences here. In the old days, you pulled the mesh using the pound and question mark symbol. You still kind of do that, but it does look, it has to be in this format now. I have the wrong name in here, so I have to change this to MAW and change it to MAW. So that would pull that Unity 3 pack. If I saved it out as MAW, the package out as MAW, and the character is MAW underscore X. I use underscore X just to indicate, you know, I made the entity. And you change the avatar controller. Before, the avatar controller was Animation SDX. You're now using the avatar controller mecanim SDX. That's all included in the package. Root motion must be false like before. Ragdoll's false. Everything else is pretty much the same until you get down into how you describe the animations. Before, we had these properties, animation idle, and we specified the name of the animation in here. It's a little different now. You don't need to do that at all because the animations are tucked into the states, and the state machine will take care of all that for you. You do need to specify the state names of the attack. So we had an attack 0 and an attack 1. You would specify it like this. Again, use the state names, not the animation names. But if you had 27 attacks, you would, and an index like that, you would list everyone out there. That's just for a check that the code uses. You would need to tell it how many attacks that you have. In the case we had 2 attacks, so we would set this value to 2. If you had 5 attacks, it would be 5. If you only have 1 attack, it's set to 0. You don't need to specify an index that if you only have one possible thing, like 1 death, 1 run, 1 hit reaction, you could just delete all these properties because the default is going to be 0. I specified them here just to show you, what those options are as well. The only thing that we had that had 2 of something was the attack, so we would only change the 0 to 2 here, and we're done with it. Other than that, that's all there is to it. The RESTX is just the same entity XML that you would use anywhere. No other changes needed, and that's pretty much all you need to do to get your character in the game. So with that, I hope you've learned something. If there's any questions, if I didn't cover something, please let me know, and I'll try to get it in another video. Have a great day, guys.